Hey, everybody, welcome, welcome. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. I'm Dr. Pat. You are listening to the Dr. Pat Show. This is talk radio to thrive by. And for many of you, you're you're like pinging me about the new intro music. Trust me, I'm still working on it. Yep. But for now, let's enjoy the beauty and the absolutely creative energy of Nick Johnson, who produced that music and gave us permission, wow, like a decade ago, to use it. Thank you for joining us here today because we're talking about the Enneagram. And it is an Enneagram, it's an Enneagram. No matter how you say it, it's a game changer. My very special co host today is Renee Siegel. And why is this important? If you are like she and you go through life, you're educated as a marriage family therapist, you get a deep understanding of that which we do not see in the world in the same way. Not just because of gender and culture and age differences, but because we have an accumulation of life experiences. You know, I coach women and, I get a call yesterday and there's a situation you just could not have predicted. This is life. But here she is, right? She's got some experience in a place kind of like where I used to live. Not quite, but the inner city treatment center. And you're working with women, you're working with children, you're working with people who are alone, you're working with folks that are trying to develop skills, but they have very few of them. And then you move on to work in the hospital setting. Once you do all that, what taps you on the shoulder to say, I'm going to open a wellness center? I'm going to collaborate with professionals. I'm going to step out into the world because I now know something and I know something I can do differently, whether it's private practice or whether she's out speaking or she's working with professionals, men and women, all of you who are dealing with dissatisfaction, job, deep desires to make more in your life. One of the things is you've got to cultivate the right tools. That's what today's show is about. As a coach, a counselor, a trainer, this is Renee stepping into a world that looks at a holistic approach to understanding humans. Today, we're going to take you on a journey of what understanding humans might be about and to how to discover your pure potential. Renee, it's great to have you. It's finally here.
Yay! Thank you for having me.
It's finally here. I mean, I just gave people just a short snippet of your journey, but it's an important journey to talk about because we go through these doorways in life. We step through the doorway, and sometimes we know there's a sign on the doorway and it says, open this door and go here. And you enter into that door. And sometimes it is like the sign says, and other times it's not. But on your journey, in all of the things you do, you must have seen something that was not working or something that needed to work better. What was your journey to finding this game-changing tool?
Well, that's a great question. So getting out of school, getting out of marriage and family therapy school and starting to work with individuals and families and couples, you learn a lot of stuff academically, but then you're face to face with people who are having real life experiences and real life challenges, just like we all are. This is a human dilemma. And you go through continuing education to learn about this technique and that technique and another technique. And each one of them offers some kind of pearl of wisdom for how you can help people. But I was always fascinated with why these really bright people and insightful people would go back and make and create these same kind of patterned responses, why we keep repeating these self-defeating behaviors. Like, what is it that takes somebody who's really smart, and I'm not just talking about smart in terms of book smarts, I'm talking about smarts in terms of street smarts too, right? We got all sorts of smarts, right?
Yeah, we do, boy.
Yeah, and we keep repeating these same patterns. And when I was introduced to the Enneagram about 20 years into my journey with helping people, so about 20 years ago, all of a sudden something made sense because the Enneagram, or the study of the Enneagram, helped me to understand why we have these knee-jerk reactions, these hardwired behaviors, these patterns that are sometimes very self-defeating, sometimes very helpful, but why we keep doing them over and over and over again. It's like, in the fellowship, they say that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And
Yeah.
yet, each and every one of us, whether we're in recovery or not, does the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Yeah. And when we do that, we end up at the moment of dissatisfaction, frustration, disappointment, and depression.
Mhm. Yeah,
But we can't see it.
yeah, yeah. So the Enneagram has, as in its study and in the practices that you can learn about in terms of using the Enneagram, it has components of looking at how you think, how you emote or have emotional reactions, and how you have behavioral reactions too. So it's kind of a composite. It's a way of kind of holistically combining your worldview, how you perceive the world, how you defend against the world, how you emotionally experience life, and what you actually do, take action and behave in life. And the word Ennea means 9, and gram is just the word to describe the illustration of the diagram. So it's a 9-pointed diagram that describes 9 different ways people would suit up to face challenges of the world, defend themselves against challenges of the world, react emotionally, behaviorally, and in thinking. And so it is truly a holistic way of helping people to understand. That's step one, though, because just because we get who we are doesn't really help us. It's when we learn to watch who we are and what we're doing and thinking and behaving, that's when we can actually shift and make some changes. So it's not putting us in a box like a lot of other
Yeah.
systems have described. It's helping you to get the map and find your way out of the box that you've already put yourself in.
And let me ask you a question about this, because you are now. I gave a very short description of where you are and where you are now. Now you are in the field of you are the leader in this field, or one of the leaders in this field, in terms of integrating everything you've done and helping people understand this human design system. This system which says these are the multifaceted ways that you may be operating in the world. And by the way, what is the benefit of this? What should you know about one of these? And what can you do? How do you navigate? And that's what we're going to be talking about throughout the show. I know for me, I took a look at mine here recently, and there's a little bit of information you could get, but there's nothing like walking somebody through this to say, look, if you are looking at what just showed up in a chart, and you see that in your chart, you are something like pretty much a 7 and an 8, you can read about it, but you're not going to understand
Mhm.
exactly what the heck that means. And that's what I love about what you do, Renee, because this isn't like another, let's just call it assessment tool.
Right.
This is not that. This
Mhm.
has so many layers of helpful information for people that if you understood this and you're confronted with the boss that says to you, I'm going to reduce your salary by $50,000, you're going to have to know how to work through that, or any other life situation. But even more importantly, and let me ask you about this understanding is to help you build the life you want, isn't it? To literally build the life you want.
Well, it's to have a better understanding of yourself. The most important relationship we will ever have at any point in time is the relationship that we have with ourselves. It's the relationship that we have with ourselves in terms of understanding ourselves, of compassionately holding ourselves, of knowing how and what to do activity wise with ourselves. And when we really get that, we can certainly engage with other people in a very different way. Until we get that piece, then we're really operating in the blind area. And that's, again, one of the great aspects of the Enneagram. When I have a sense of, wow, I'm doing this and thinking this and feeling this because of my hard wiring. I don't have to stay in this place, but I'm watching myself do this. That's why my tagline is dancing between observation and participation. It's like, can I watch it? And then can I step back in from that place of observation and then maybe shift in terms of not doing something I would typically do? I can make a change. I can pause and pivot and do something different. So merely understanding yourself is the first piece. And then engaging with other people differently is the second piece because of that pause and pivot.
Me, when we come back, what I want to talk about is the true holistic nature of this. Because look, when I signed on to do a radio show 17 years ago, I did not know that this would be a giant playground for me to look at myself and to really be in front of the best listening audience on the planet and get feedback from them and get feedback from producers. I had no idea this would be the place that I would have to stumble, fall, step in a pothole to learn about the very nature. The question is, what did I learn about this along the way to being that person that gets to talk with you? And what would, if I'd had this in front of me, what could I have learned sooner, Renee? Like, what pothole maybe I didn't have to fall in? What swimming pool, deep end of the swimming pool did I jump in and I don't swim? How would this have helped me? And we're going to go through this. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about why the understanding is so essential and helping us navigate life. Renee Siegel will also going to talk about her show. Let's take a short break, everybody. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I am so thrilled to be introducing you to Renee Siegel. Renee, before we start to talk about this amazing holistic system, I want folks to know, how do they find out more about you? Tell us about your upcoming show. And also, what is the service that you've now created to integrate? Did I create like a new word for you? Enneagram. Did I give you like a new brand? The Enneagram by Renee Siegel. Please tell people, I told you I have a strange time with words. Please tell people how they can find out more about you.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I have a website. It's yourpurepotential.com. It's the letter U, the letter R, the word purepotential.com. So you can contact me through that website. I'm going to be starting my own show with you folks on May 24th at 4:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I think I am on the second and fourth Mondays of the month, where we will be going into an intro to the Enneagram. We'll be taking a full tour of the types. We'll be looking at these centers of intelligence of thinking, emoting, and behaving. And then we will have an opportunity to hear from each one of the Enneagram types through their own narrative, the lens of their type, what their Enneagram journey has been like. So it's not just me sharing information, you're going to hear it from the source. And we're going to do that over the course of 12 weeks. And I'm just absolutely jazzed to be able to do that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And there's a way that you can take a test, because everybody wants to know what their type is, right?
Right.
Everybody wants to know what their type is. And so I'm going to share a caveat, and that is that the journey to finding your type, it can be just as rich as landing on your type. We only have one type, and that type is pretty hardwired. We all have aspects of all the types, But the journey to finding your type is rich because as you begin to synthesize information and look at each of these types, you're beginning to take that inner observation journey, that self-awareness journey, the noticing, like you were talking about during break of, am I doing this or am I doing that? I mean, you have to ask yourself those questions and really look inside for those answers. So if you come up on this Enneagram test, and I'll give you a website that you can go to take a complimentary test in just a minute. If you come up and your bar graph or your numbers are close by to other numbers, just consider both of those types. Read about the types, see which ones land and resonate with you, where you feel a visceral, somatic kind of experiencing of those types, which is right for you. And that part of the journey, that inner observation, is every bit as important as landing on your type.
And I think that this is interesting because, I've talked to a number of people who have really worked with and looked at and on the journey to find their core, so to speak, to find out more about themselves. And I can tell you for me that I've taken the Enneagram test or Enneagram test from the website we're about to give out again, and I've taken it from other sites. And I have to tell you that some of the results are quite similar. 8 and 7 show up like at the top in no matter what I take. And then it varies a little bit, but it's also important to understand what these mean. And today we're going to go through and talk about them and talk about perhaps how we show up in the world. And because of how we show up in the world and we don't have an understanding of it, we don't know what to do with it. We don't know what to do with how we show up. And it's like, now what do I do with that? Is there a way that I can just, when I'm around somebody that's not like that, what can I learn? Especially if you are somebody in the workplace and you're leading a team or you're working with an organization and you just wing it, so to speak, because you don't know, or you take the long route and over a 10-year period, perhaps you get to know the person that's going to be your predecessor. There is a much better way. Isn't that what we're talking about? Because please don't step into potholes if you don't need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a way to avoid certain kinds of things about ourselves. We all have aspects of ourselves that we consider becoming, that we like, that we appreciate, that we have no problem sharing with other people. And we all have aspects of ourselves that are less becoming, that are our shadow side, that we don't particularly like. And they aggravate and irritate other people more often than not, but they're still part of who we are. All of it is a part of who we are. All of it is a part of being a human being, the warts, the freckles, and all the good stuff too.
Yeah.
Everything makes us a human being. And the more aware we are of all of it, the more we can sit and hold all of it, the more compassion we can muster up for all of it, the less of a hold it actually has on us.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. And we're going to talk about this more. How do people find out their type? Let's make sure we mention that. And then let's talk about some of the way we self-assess. Is this a scenario where some of the types are more healthy than others? How does that work? But how do people, if they're listening today, where can they go and do this as we're speaking?
Okay. So there are lots and lots of Enneagram assessments that you can take. Some of them cost money. I'm going to give you one that does not cost money that you can take that's a relatively accurate assessment, and it will create a bar graph for you at the end of the assessment so that you can see how strong you are in each one of the types. And so the website is www.eclecticenergies plural.com, eclecticenergies.com. There are 2 Enneagram tests that you can take on that site. The one that provides a lot more information than the other is test 2 with instinctual variance. And once you have your results, you can then start to YouTube or Google information about the types, especially if you land on like 2 types that are really strong. And then as you begin to look at them, you'll go, oh, this is really more me than that is me. It becomes clear and clear and clear. Just like, can I use you as an example, Dr. Pat?
Yeah, sure.
So, you have 7, 8, 8, 7, you keep talking about that. Well, my hunch is, and from the brief amount of time that we've spent together, that you have one of those types that is your type, and the other, as you look at the Enneagram map, that is your wing that influences your type. And so the energy of one of them is stronger than the energy of the other. And again, this is one of the things that's difficult about the Enneagram is it's a complicated system. It's a thorough system. It's a holistic system. It's a wonderful system, but it's a complicated system. So finding your type, understanding about your type, knowing that your underlying core motivations are what rule your types. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that.
Sure.
If I were to ask our listeners, how many of you think it's important to be a good person? The majority of everybody would say, of course it's important to be a good person. What are you, crazy? I think it's important to be a good person. So we'd get a lot of people saying, I think it's important to be a good person.
Right.
If I changed that question and said to people, why do you think it's important to be a good person? What would happen if you weren't a good person? How would your life look if you didn't consider yourself a good person? What would that mean? We're looking now not just at an answer to, is it important to be a good person, but we're looking at the core motivation for why somebody does what they do, or feels what they feel, or thinks what they think. And these thinking, feeling, and behavioral patterns are the ones that really dictate our type.
Well, look, I love that we're going to be digging deeply into this as we go. And, I'm very clear about the fact that the more I'm learning about myself, and clearly I have not looked at this with you in depth. So let's just put that caveat out there. This is like a real live experiment conversation with most amazing Renee Siegel. When we come back, we're going to talk about the types, but we're also going to talk about what to do and not do when you get your type. Don't fall in the pit that many of us fell in with other assessments like the Myers-Briggs, where you got your type and you boss freaked out that you were an INFP. That's for real for me. Almost lost my job over that situation. That's not the Enneagram. That's not what we're talking about today. This is about understanding, implementing, taking action, and knowing what to do. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're also taking your questions, everybody. 1-800-930-2819. If you have taken the test and maybe you got something you want to talk to Renee about, come on, give us a shout. Or over on Facebook, give us a question. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so I am here with the most amazing Renee Siegel. She is an expert in Enneagram and what we're talking about today, but she's also much more. I mentioned she was a counselor. She's somebody that understands the multifaceted nature of our culture and our lives and works with people, pretty much all over the world. And when we're talking about a tool like the Enneagram today, I just shared with her, and during the break, I've taken the Enneagram test from the website we gave out today, and I've taken it from another site. But one of the things that comes true, there are some of the types that come up for me that are fairly consistent in both. The question really is, what are the types? Let's take a tour of the types. But let me just say this to you. This is unlike any other assessment type you've got. This is not going to be one of those assessments that causes you to cringe, because you can learn out about how this works, especially in Enneagram Conversations, upcoming podcast series with Renee. You'll be able to call in, you'll be able to take your test, you'll be able to ask her questions, you'll be able to and understand it. For me, when they were reviewing my chart during the break, and I can't remember Renee's exact words, but there was something that required an advanced conversation, which we're not doing today. But I promise you, if it's of interest to you, Renee will come back and we'll take a look at what that means. Renee, what's the best website for people to find out more about you?
YouArePurePotential.com, the letter U, the letter R, the word purepotential.com. And it has an information about my practice, my counseling and coaching practice. I specialize in 3 areas: addictions, long-term recovery addictions, relationships, personal and professional relationships, and wellness, overall wellness kinds of strategies for people who are trying to incorporate wellness in their life and don't want to stay on lots of mood-altering medications to make that happen.
Boy, I got to tell you, we need that right now.
We sure do.
The numbers are coming out. This is a profession, and I have been a coach and mentor in the recovery arena for over 30 years, and I have never seen such numbers ever for women, ever. And I'm concerned.
Yeah. So we're going to take a tour of the types and give you a little information about each one of the types. So a question that was asked last segment that we didn't answer: is there one type that's healthier than another?
Oh boy.
No, there are no types that are healthier than another. And piggybacking on that question, are certain types more likely to get along with others than others? And healthy types get along with healthy types. So within each of our types, as we do with this tour of the types, you'll find that as I'm giving these descriptions, I'm giving descriptions of an average person. By the time you've collected as many life experiences as I have in this stage of my life, I've certainly done a fair amount of work on myself. So even though I will describe to you my type, I'll describe to you the average experience of my type. And I would like to say that I've done a lot of work, and I'm not the average experience of my type right now. I'm a healthier version of that. So if you think of a Slinky, the old toy, a Slinky, it's kind of like,
I love the Slinkies.
Yeah, it's kind of like we really kind of expand ourselves as we really see past our types, and we're not so hardwired and super glued to the patterns of our type. So we're going to go around and talk about the types chronologically from 1 to 9. And type 1 is called the perfectionist. It sits in the body triad, meaning that the area of intelligence, the center of intelligence that it operates from, is body intelligence or intuition, a sense of how do I access information from an experience in my body, in my human body, and instinctive or intuitive intelligence. We have heart intelligence, belly or intuitive intelligence, and head intelligence. And more often than not, we talk about head intelligence. So when we talk Enneagram language and we do this tour of the types, we're going to talk about which center each one of these types sits. Mm-hmm. So one sits in the instinctual or body belly type of intelligence. The focus is on what needs to be corrected in the world, where there is error. There's a lot of internal dialogue. Lots of types have internal dialogue. We all have an internal critic, but a 1 has an internal committee criticizing things. So they have a lot of going on upstairs about what needs attention for correction, what's right or wrong. They can, in a very low level, they can be very moralistic and very judgmental. At a very high level, one can just see the absolute symphony of perfection in the world. So just to show you the bandwidth of health. Type 2s are called the givers. That is the type that I, God bless you, resonate with. And it's a helper or the giver. And their focus of it, they're in the heart triad. They come from a place where they feel their way in the world. They emote their way in the world. There's sensate feelings in our belly, but feelings that we're talking about, emotional feelings right now. Type twos, um, focus of attention is generally on other people's needs. So they're, even though they're in the heart triad, they're not as aware of their own emotional experience as they are deeply aware of other people's emotional experiences. Hence, at their lowest level, they can be martyrs and codependent. And at their highest levels, they can truly serve and be very giving, nurturing, loving, generous people without any need to get something in return. A type 3 is a doer, or we call them the performer. They have the tagline of they're human doings instead of human beings. They like to get her done. We have a culture of kind of get her done. You know, a lot of the focus of attention is on productivity and efficiency. This type sits in the heart triad as well, but even though it sits in the heart triad, there is a tendency to see emotions as messy and getting in the way of getting things done.
Mhm. I saw where this showed up in my chart and I was a little confused about it. Not because I didn't understand it, but because of what you're saying right now. And because of some of the other things that show up. That's why it's so important to sit down and work with you. Because if I look at my life right now and you ask me where am I in my life right now and I answer those questions, I would bet to say that if I really thought about it, Renee, I don't think I'm any different now than I was when I was younger. I just couldn't, I just didn't have the sense of being able to get the things done that I wanted to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting because I find that when you look at each type individually, it's one thing, but hopefully we'll get to you talking about when you look at how these come out side by side as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the skills and the resources that we gather as we gain life experiences generally have us far more prepared to manage certain things in our lives, you know, as we get older. And so our threes are human doings, our performers, their focus of attention is not on their emotions, even though they are in the heart triad and they are very sensitive. Our type fours are the last type in the heart triad. They also come from a place of resorting to and leaning into that deep emotional experience. They oftentimes feel misunderstood. They are the one type within the heart triad that are deeply focused on an intense emotional experience. For many people, that's very uncomfortable because our society doesn't generally respect and appreciate the deep, intense emotional experiences that people have. And fours can bask in the sweetness of even sadness. They really love the emotionality of anything. On their low side, they can be drama kings and queens, and on their high side, they can be expressive artists who are just sharing their incredible creativity with the world. Our fives are a head triad. They're the first of the head triad, and they're often called the investigator. Oh, I didn't give you the name for the four. The four could be the romantic or the individualist. Um, the and by the way, there's lots of names for each one of these types, depending on whose school you study under. The five, often called the observer or the investigator, is looking at facts. They really see, they mentally map things, they gather information, they see information as power. Information is potent and powerful, and they gather information in an effort to avoid fear and uncertainty in the world. So they're oftentimes the brainiacs of the Enneagram, not always, but if you look at some of the brightest and most eccentric people in the world, oftentimes they're type fives. Type sixes have a relationship, they're also a head type, they have a relationship with fear, call them the loyal skeptic or the loyalist. They oftentimes are very duty bound. They manage fear by either challenging authority and plunging through their fear, or stepping back from and avoiding fear. They play out worst case scenarios. They second guess things. They play the devil's advocate, examining pros and cons of everything. Our sevens, which we might call the enthusiasts, are adventurers. I think there's actually a school that even calls them the adventurist. They reframe everything. The glass is always not only half full, the glass is teeming over the top. Life is an adventure filled with possibility and options, and please do not step on my options. Low-level experience of a seven is that they will avoid pain and be really superficial. And the highest expression of a seven is to really move through that deep pain and still be able to reframe something coming out of the other side of a really difficult experience, moving through it. Our eights are called the boss, the maverick, and they are a body triad. They're the first type in the body triad. It actually starts 8, 9, and 1, but we started chronologically with 1. Our eights are intuitive. They're all or nothing. They are the one type in the Enneagram that are seriously comfortable with the energy of anger. Anger is just really not anything to be upset about. In fact, they can manage and feel anger in their body, or maybe not manage it. That's a higher level experience of an 8. Usually lower level 8s don't manage anger very well. They're very intimidating to people around them. But as they grow more aware of themselves, they can modulate that energy. They come in with this big burst of energy everywhere they go. They can't sneak into a room at all. They blast into a room, even if they don't intend to. But they're great leaders and very able to be like spiritual warriors. And our 9s are the peacemakers. They're also a body type. They manage anger by being passive aggressive. They would rather go along to get along and not rock the boat. We call them kind of sleepy at times, because they often forget their own needs. They'll set their own needs aside in service of the group, just to keep things going along and moving slowly. And that is the fastest tour of the types I've ever given. This is just meant to whet your appetite and pique your interest, because we could talk about each one of these types for a month.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to be doing more of this, because I'm going to put this out for our team here to do this and take it. But I was fascinated because I've been talking, people don't know this, but you and I have been talking for weeks now, and we've gotten to know each other, and I've gotten to know the power of what you do, and how you walk people through what the potential potholes are, because you're this. Nothing to be concerned about, but this is something you should know about and be aware of. Some of the things you described and what came up in my chart, and let's go ahead and skip the break, Olivia and Benny. When you described the part about anger, it was really interesting to me. I could walk into a room and sound like I'm furious at you, and I'm really not. But there's something in my voice, the way that I'm talking about it as a leader of the team, that is very intense. And this is a part of me that I've tried to really look at. There's a level of intensity. I grew up in an environment where there's interesting things in my performance review, but I don't even have to say a word. And people might say to me, man, you look really unapproachable. I'm just thinking. I don't really have anything going on about thinking about you. I just got something going on in my mind. But you said something interesting. These are not one size fits all. They're not just, this is your thing. It's understanding these in the context of everything in it. Because I will tell you this, while I don't really have thoughts about my own level of anger, I can have a moment of anger at a political thing. And if you ask me about it 30 seconds from that moment, I probably couldn't remember what it was. Mm-hmm. But I am like a sponge. around other people's angers and emotions.
Mm.
And that's always been an interesting dynamic for me. It's like I can be passionate or talk to you about something I read in the headline, and you'll call me later and you're still thinking about it. I'm like, what did I say, Renee?
You're done. You're done.
I'm done. Um, but when it comes to the absorption, and so tell me how we get to learn about that interesting dynamic and where that would show up in somebody's assessment.
Mhm. Well, a type is just where we begin. When you finally
Thank you.
land on a type, like
Yeah.
you land on an 8 or a 7, there's so many other parts of it. Like I said, this is a very slow and deliberate and long time journey. One of the reasons I was so attracted to this process was that the more I knew about it, the more I realized I didn't know. So it was like one of those things that was like ancient wisdom traditions where you scratch the surface and it's like, oh, this is really juicy. What does that mean? And what does this mean? So as somebody who resonates with a certain type, I also have a subtype. A subtype is an expression of my type, and that talks about whether or not I really enjoy spending maybe a lot of time by myself, or a lot of times engaging with other people, or a lot of time being involved in organizations, or a lot of time um, just with my beloved alone, that one sacred special person in my life. Each one of the types has a subtype, which is where those instinctual variants and the Enneagram test 2 that I gave you, it gives you not just your type, but it'll give you that instinctual
Mm-hmm.
variant. Those instinctual variants are a sexual variant, which has very little to do with sexuality, but it has to do with having a special relationship and bonding with a significant other. Um, Social subtypes, which is not just about being in organizations, but how well you do in
Mm-hmm.
groups, or what a cause, maybe a cause that you feel compelled to participate in, and a self-preservation aspect, which is, just the need to kind of pull in and be away from and have your own
Mm-hmm.
provisions, or field a set of circumstances all by yourself. These color our experience for each one of our types, and those may shift as our life changes, although our type doesn't change. So just as, and there's a lot of controversy over what I'm about to say in the Enneagram world, but
Yes.
I have a strong belief about this, and that is that just thinking about getting older, I travel differently with things in my suitcase today than I would when I was 20. If I lost a pair of flip-flops and I was traveling and got off the plane, I just go to Walgreens and get a new pair of flip-flops. If I lost my flip-flops that have a good arch in them and I knew I was going to hike up somewhere, go for a really long walk, I'd be a little bit more aggravated today than I would have been when I was 20. So there's more of a self movement towards being self-preserved as we age. That doesn't mean that I lead with a self-preservation
Yeah.
subtype. So our subtypes color all of our types. The work we've done on ourselves colors all of our types.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is what's exciting. And I know you're going to be working with our team here at the network. And it's interesting. I sent a little ping out and I sent the link to both Linda and Jessica to fill out. And, and I'm pretty sure Livia's already done it. And, what's interesting is not to start to have a dialogue with other people about what you see and what you think. I think it's so important to save this time and space sacredly to work with someone like you, because things can be misunderstood. And if you show up and you're an 8 and somebody else shows up as something that's like has 8 at the bottom, it's an immediate characteristic that you want to point out. And yet you really do need to understand this, when in fact that may be the exact team member you need.
Mm-hmm.
That may be the person you need, because if there are all me's on the team, we're not getting anything done.
Exactly right. Exactly right. We had that in an Enneagram organization where we were missing one type, and as soon as we added that person to our board, all of the dilemmas that we were facing,
Right.
we
Right.
went away.
Now, Linda has not done hers, and Jessica was very quick to finish hers, but I'm not going to talk about them on air. That's really personal. But I would venture to say that when we look at each of us on the team, there will be an in-depth understanding. Every team needs that analyzer type. Every team needs that person that's going to say something or ask a question where the whole team is rallying around the whole booyah, and that person's going to come in and say, but what if the tree you're planting doesn't get enough water where you're planting it? How will you make sure it gets irrigated every day? And everybody looks at that person like, are you seriously asking us that question right now? Are you kidding me? We're halfway through. We're really excited. And you're bringing up this problem, but every team needs it. We wouldn't be here today without that type of person on our team. And we have two of them, I think.
Yeah. And you know, in certain occupations, that's less important than in others. I mean, there are certain occupations that are pretty likely to have, you know, I mean, I want a perfectionist to do my surgery.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very interested in having somebody who's very detailed, and that doesn't mean it necessarily needs to be a type 1.
Right.
But you know, it could be a type 5, is somebody paying a lot of attention to the facts and and that person may not have the best bedside manner, but if that's going to keep me alive, and the precision and the attention that's paid to
Yep.
that detail is there. So we have these innate capacities to offer these gifts. Each
Yeah.
one of these types has a spiritual essential gift.
Exactly.
We didn't even touch on the spiritual aspects of the Enneagram. The Enneagram is the underpinnings of this theory are over 2,000
Yep.
years old.
And that's why I brought it up, Renee, because I wanted to bring that out. I wanted to bring out why this is so different and how it's so different, because the other assessments that I've taken were not. They were really assessments that say, this is who you are, this is who your team is. You got to go through some behavioral modification with no understanding about the spiritual nature of this.
Right.
You know, about how you bring a team together and you honor what each person brings to the team. And you see the value in that, but you also understand the hiccups of yourself. Like me looking at this for myself, and what showed up on my chart is, you know, especially when I think about, well, what are the potholes that I step in as being like this? And I hope that in the next time you come back, we talk about this, but you're also going to cover the spiritual nature of this on your show. So tell us about that. Tell us about how people work with you directly, how they can get an assessment that helps them understand a life path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the show is going to cover, in our 12 episodes, it's going to cover the basic information about the Enneagram and its spiritual underpinnings and where it kind of came from, these centers of intelligence, these portals that we talked about, head, heart, and body. And it's going to talk about each one of the 9 types in greater depth. Again, beginning on May 24th at 4 p.m., Enneagram Conversations. And you can reach me, Renee Siegel, at yourpurepotential.com, the letter U, the letter R, purepotential.com. I believe in the contact. It offers you a brief consultation with me at no charge. So if you'd like more information, I'd be happy to speak with you. I counsel and coach right now. My practice is almost full. I have room for one more person until mid-June. Because I only work with X number of people, because I teach and train. And then as they move on, I bring in somebody else, because we work in really intense ways. Specializing in 3 areas: long-term addictions recovery, personal and professional relationships, and developing unique paths to wellness, specifically based on your type. The Enneagram is the hub of my practice. And Dr. Pat, I thank you so much for allowing me to just briefly touch into this really cool topic of the Enneagram.
And there's going to be more to come. Renee, thank you so much for today. Please give out your website again.
U, the letter R, purepotential.com.
And much more to come. And for those of you that are just curious about what showed up on my chart, we'll be doing more about that later, because it requires a broader conversation. But the point that I want to leave you with is, please look at this as a spiritual journey. And if you do that, Your judgment will be reserved only for the warm of heart. Let's talk to you next time, everybody. We'll see you in a minute.